You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper.
I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Hello, welcome to the Man Hug. This month we are focusing on the theme of fatherhood. We have just me, Ian and Dan today, with Conleth currently away, which I'm sure will result in at least 50% of our listeners now disappointed that we don't have the buttery one with us, but he'll be back next month. So a little later on we're going to be joined by Kieran Anders, who will be telling us all about Dad Matters. But now we are joined by Pete and Anthony from Dad's Outdoors. Welcome, fellas.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you guys here. We've been following your progress for a while on social media, so it's amazing to have you, especially with this theme of fatherhood, really. So how we get every guest to start us off, just tell us a bit about yourself. So, Pete, tell us a bit about yourself first.
Wow. Okay. So I'm Pete, co-director of Dad's Outdoors. I'm 49 years old. I've got a 10-year-old son called Frank, and I've been married to my wife Emma for 15 years. I like nature. I like sitting around fires and chatting. I like heavy metal music and laughing at fart jokes. And that's kind of where we got to where we are now.
Anthony?
Yeah, so I'm Anthony. I'm from Liverpool, Bootle, proud from Bootle. I've got two kids, Erica and Axel, both 7 and 9. Me and my wife have been married for 11 years, and quite similarly to Pete, I enjoy being in nature. Find a lot of peace and healing in nature, and you know, we sort of come together through a mutual friend and decided to bring about Dad's Outdoors.
Amazing. So where did that idea come from then? How did it start?
Kind of like a double-edged thing, wasn't it? Like brief history was about 6 years ago, I lost my dad to Alzheimer's, and it was a really painful process. And I just found myself going for walks, just being outside just made me feel better. And then I wanted to learn more about forests, more about the environment. So I did a forest school leadership course, and that got me thinking the psychology behind it, about the benefits for children. I thought, well, this could be applied to everyone, especially men like myself. Wouldn't it be great to have like a forest school but for dads? Yeah. So I was thinking that's what I'm going to do. A mutual friend introduced me to Ant, and Ant was very passionate about outdoors and bushcraft skills and things. I think, you know, he'd done a lot when he was a kid and a teenager, and he wanted to kind of collectivise dads in the region to kind of give back to the community and do some social good. And we were kind of independently trying to set these two things up, and then thought, you know what, this would make a wonderful thing together, like if we had the same ethos and worked on it as a thing.
Yeah, amazing. So why do you feel it's important for fathers to have a place to come together?
I think quite a bit recently we've been discussing something that is referred to as the third space. Historically it used to be the pub, the working man's club, church and such places, and with the challenges of modern day life, a lot of people are missing those things. So if you don't enjoy football or go in the match or drinking, which a lot of people don't do these days, then you end up missing that space and the communication that goes with it. We find nature, and specifically sat around a fire pit, a really, really great place to regain that third space. Yeah,
it's amazing. We've over the last 3 years that's come up so many times, especially the decline of the social club. And
they're going to mention it every podcast.
Yeah, the working man's club.
You should come to Dad's Outdoors.
But it's so true, isn't it? And I suppose once you become a father as well, time often becomes limited as well, maybe because of employment and other things. So I suppose there's that angle as well. And if that's what you noticed from when you started it, men have just come to it.
Yeah, I was going to say a huge aspect of it we've talked about is when you're a dad, especially in your middle age, it's hard to make new friends. It's hard to socialise on that level because your time is so tight.
Yeah.
A lot of our dads, we've realised, aren't from Liverpool. They've moved to Liverpool, myself included. And finding that close network of people is quite difficult sometimes. So the space where it's that old cliche, so women solve their problems face to face, men do it side by side. So we found that like doing an activity just opened people up to share and talk more when they were doing something. So that's kind of how it just grew really from that.
So from that initial, your first session in a sense, how has it grown legs? How have you got the message out there?
Well, I think we've mostly grown by word of mouth.
Yeah.
I don't think we've grown much by our social media. We tend to get feedback that people find our flyers. We put them in places where you will find dads, barbershops, shops, the library, Chandler's, places where people will be with their children. Quite often as well, we find that it's not the dads who instigate it, it's their partners, and they will come along and say, I didn't realise, but my partner tells me I'm isolated.
You need this.
She gave me this flyer and made me come.
Like, can you get out the house? Go there.
And we've had that similar story from quite a few dads, really, haven't we?
And I love the fact that the most contact we get on like social media has been through other professionals and organisations, but the actual dads that want to use what we do, it's always through a flyer or a word of mouth. So it's quite a natural old school kind of process. And
honestly, it's like a theme on this. We've been going for 3 years, but one of the things it's partners and women that have actually pinpointed the sort of help, and that's interesting in and of itself. But you've said exactly that, isn't it? And it's unbelievable. So that's why half the people, understandably, listen to the podcast are women, and we've had obviously guests that are women, but it's because they know we don't talk, and it's like pointing them into that direction. Once they get there, absolutely fine, but it's getting them there, isn't it?
And we got a really, really good piece of feedback actually, because we went out looking for feedback and testimonials from some of the dads, but then we got one from one of the mums, didn't we? About the difference in her husband since he'd been coming, and it was probably one of the most important pieces of feedback that we got.
Absolutely. That he was a more present dad, a more calmer presence around the house. Sometimes men in particular, we're saying that the only emotion that they're allowed to express is anger, because all the other ones you have to suppress and like squash down. And I think that's where the barrier lies between men looking for spaces to share with other men, because they've judged themselves for even feeling the way they do in the first place.
Definitely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think all too often men don't talk. We just need a space to talk. We need to be around the right people, and we need that right environment, and we'll talk, and I think that's probably what you guys are finding, isn't it? Amazing. One of the things that we always plug, we're huge lovers of the natural health service. I've used ecotherapy as a mental health practitioner, absolutely love it, know its powers, and I think most people, it was a big thing to go to during COVID in particular. We had our 1 hour prison walk a day and things like that. We were hugging trees. We seen then the huge power of nature, didn't we? So for you guys, in particular, why do you think the outdoor space works for fathers?
Well, for me personally, and I think maybe going off some of the feedback from some of the dads as well, it's that when we created this space, we done it outdoors, so that there's no, you're not enclosed, there's no one around you, there's no one listening, and when you've got the fire, the woodland, the peace, the quiet, what did we have last week? We had a fox come along and visit us and things like that.
I've got a friendly fox.
And you can be excited by those little things while you're out in the environment. In other places, you wouldn't get that sort of interaction. And again, I think sometimes it's the fear of being judged. If you were all sat there in the pub and you spotted a robin out the window and said, "Oh, look at the lovely robin on the branch," someone would tell you to shut up, or or laugh at you, and you get that judgment. But we're all there because we enjoy being in nature.
One thing we this weekend was men want to play. We're still children at heart, and we just sometimes need a bit of a nudge in the right direction to go and have a play. And we were playing frisbee, and then someone just suddenly joined us, and we had this big game of frisbee going on. And then you were making spears, and then we set up a target, and we were just, all we want to do is hang out and be little kids again and make spears, make a den, sleep in a hammock, like just hanging out, basically being a kid again. But I think at some point as a man, you're told that that's not useful, not relevant, that's childish, you shouldn't have that. And we're just craving that need.
No, it's so true. We had the guys from Five Guys who came on, and they said exactly the same. So there comes a point where you stop playing as a lad, but it's still in you. So like when they do their walks, they'll roll down the hills and things like this, and they bring it into every element. And I think it's brilliant. But one of the things that I learned when I was doing the research for this episode in particular is when you're bonding with your baby as a new dad, the biggest release of oxytocin is through play. Whereas with a mother it's nurturing, but with a dad, the oxytocin that's produced is through play.
Absolutely right. Do you ever see those memes? And my wife always sends them to me of like dads at bedtime and literally like throwing the kid against the wall and diving on top of them like a wrestling. That's how. But that is that connection. And my son will often sometimes say, "Dad, it's wrestle time," and we'll have to go and like roll about. And it's that's our connection. And I think what you're saying about nature is it is that kind of cinematic aspect. Like you're not hemmed in. There's no doors enclosed, and the vulnerability is kind of gone because you're not being judged or held in an office.
Not clinical, is it?
Like I've been to talking therapies before, and it's like it sometimes feels like you're in the headmaster's office and you're on the clock, and you feel like maybe that's not the space to really open up.
I'm sure that's what you're finding with all other guys that come there.
Totally.
As well.
No one has ever walked in and we've gone, right, tell us about your troubles, tell us about your childhood. We'll just sit there, have a laugh, usually tell too many fart jokes while we're making a brew, and then talk will inevitably just evolve, and people feel freer to just share.
That's it. There's probably so many, bonuses for men going, not expecting, that outcome really, but it's so organic, it happens naturally, doesn't it? We had the Florrie men's walking group on quite a few times, and these are older lads, a lot of them are retired, and I've been on the walk a few times, and I'm just picking up what things people say, and it's so powerful, but they probably wouldn't do that in any other setting. It's just because of the natural being outdoors in an environment that doesn't feel clinical, and you feel like you can just chat as you would any of your mates,
I think that aspect of, like you say, not being clinical as well, like you can feel free to do what you want when you're out there. No one's going to tell you off for making a mess. Anything goes. You can shoot off and come back, and it's just a great atmosphere.
We've had dads turn up for the first time and just be quite quiet and sit there and just observe, and they're very happy. They have a bicky and they'll have a brew, and then I think the atmosphere itself just encourages them, and they'll come back, and then they might share a bit more, and then they might be quite vulnerable. But it's just maybe men just need a little bit of permission to open up, and if you've got a safe, non-judgmental space, that's where it's at.
Yeah, amazing. So, what advice would you give for any fathers, or new dads? In terms of, there's obviously a lot of anxiety around it, and there's a lot of often isolation as well. From like the dads that you guys have at your group, what kind of advice would you give
to a new dad?
Or someone who's expecting to be a dad, or
I think it's important to be aware of that, the risk of falling into that isolated state, and probably to make use of what you've already got. One thing that I found was that I had a strong support network already there behind me, that I'd developed through years and years of my life, but because I'd stepped away from them, spending time in university, having me kids and things like that, I didn't turn to them. But then not long after making Dads Outdoors, I found that some of them were experiencing the isolation themselves, and it wasn't until they realised what I was doing that they turned around and said to me, well, can I come to that? I'm feeling that as well, I'm struggling with that. And I hadn't even considered them. So I think one piece of advice would be, like, who have you already got? And if you don't find someone that you've already got, come to Dad's Outdoors.
Have a look what's on your doorstep.
There's lots out there.
It's great advice.
Yeah, I think for looking back to when I became a dad, it was such like a life-changing experience. And I think if, like many of the dads we're working with, you've had a difficult childhood and you've had a difficult relationship with your parents, you maybe didn't have those support networks that you needed and wanted, and it can be quite a wrench when you become a parent. And I guess I would say go slowly, maybe find support to understand your own childhood and how that can influence you as a parent. Like I had this determination to be the exact opposite of what my dad was, and to be completely committed, and that helped me, and I'm still learning. It's not there's no end product to this. I'm still learning as a dad, you know. Every year my son changes and I have to kind of change with him.
It's great advice.
So something that we end up discussing quite often is identity. It comes around a lot, and I know personally when I became a parent, my identity changed a lot, and it wasn't until years later I realised that there was quite a big aspect of who I am missing. We spoke about it, didn't we? And we started like sort of trying to plug back into our old selves, and like I can't wear the baggy jeans anymore, and you know, the crazy t-shirts and the mad hairdos and stuff like that. Like, but all those aspects of me are still there, and what was really, really empowering for me was to share that version of me with my children, and to find out that they absolutely loved that version of me. So don't lose track of yourself, I think, is one thing that I think would be a really good, important piece of information.
One of the things I really love about what you're saying there as well, and for the listeners there, Anthony's got these jeans on and amazing coloured shirts, t-shirts and stuff on. One of the things I think is that with all the social media and phones, they're dead useful things, obviously, but at the same time, you can just get caught up on your screen and that screen time. So being outside, have you found any changes with that? Because I would guess people aren't really on the phones then if they're making a fire, if they're putting a tent up or walking and stuff. Have you found that, in terms of a younger generation, certainly, and for all of us, because I know I've got friends who are always on the phones, and it's that, isn't it? It
doesn't even come into it. I think people turn up more than willing to let go of all that. They come to us specifically to be themselves for a couple of hours, and that's no responsibilities, no distraction. I think they're 100% present, and that's brilliant. That's really important. And we found so my son's 10, your children are the same age. Obviously they use screens, they're watching YouTube, they've got iPads, and we're very aware of how that can go and the damage that can do to young minds. So we have these community sessions down where we help clean up the woods, and we help in other projects, and we bring our families along, we bring our wives, we bring our kids. And we did one recently, and there was an age range of maybe, I think it went from 2 up to 13, and the kids just went off like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, and they were gone. And then the only time they come back, said, "Dad, can I borrow your knife? I need to sharpen this stick." And then, by the way, my tribal name is I think my son was what was it? What were the names now?
Black Ninja,
It was
and
the Ginger Ninja, the Sloth,
and they all had great names
Caveman Boy, and all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, you sound like 90s wrestlers, but what a joyful thing. They didn't go, "Dad, I'm bored. Dad, can I have your phone?" Not once they asked that. So I think we've touched upon this, the primal nature of what nature does to you and where we've come from. Even the circle shape of a fire circle and staring into a flame, which is far more interesting than any TV program. That kind of stuff, you don't, sometimes you don't have words for it, you just feel it in your body, and I think that's it really.
It sounds like you get a lot out of it as well, like the organising of it.
We made it for us. It just so happens other people
like it too.
What I mean by that, most charities and organisations and projects come on here, they realise that, I get a lot out of seeing the reward it's given other people, in terms of the outcomes. You've got a load of testimonials, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, how rewarding is that for you to read those from this initial idea,
I did shed a tear. I showed my wife, and I went, look what people are saying about us. It's just, Do you want me to read one out?
Please do, yeah.
Oh God. Okay, I don't know where to start. So, this was one of my favourite things I've done in a long while. An evening of openness and empathy. A social space to connect around the fire. Enjoy a brew, a chat, and have a go at some bushcraft skills. This was one of my favourite. I felt wide, alive last night, like a burden had been lifted. I mean, we don't promise anything. We just lay the space on, and actually we're really proud of the fact that it is like a democracy. Like, they come in, if they want to do something, we'll do it. It's not like we're teaching all them; they're teaching us as well.
Yeah. That's so powerful to read. To hear that. It shows, doesn't it? You build it, they'll come, and the rewards are just incredible.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Amazing.
So one of the aims of Dad's Outdoors, really, when we had our first meeting that I called that time ago, was that the dads be empowered to put sessions on themselves, and we either facilitate it or help identify skills gaps and things like that, and we put it together. And after just a couple of months, one of the dads decided he wanted to do a peak a month. So he now puts on monthly hikes. We have weekly walking sessions and things like that. And one of the dads said he wanted to learn how to make natural cordage. So we then learned how to do that, and we just sit there and learn to do it together. It's not about like us turning up with the answers or this is how you do something. We figure it out together.
That's it. And you've just hit on another benefit which often stems from these groups, isn't it? The social network that people then go off and do things. It's not just this session, is it? It's building up that bigger support network, and often the bigger social support that's there for everyone as well. It's massive.
It's opened up, I think, angles everywhere of like we're not qualified therapists, but we're able to provide a therapeutic space for people. And one thing I want to say, I love writing. It helped me write in journals. When I was having a tough time, writing my thoughts down was really helpful to just process things. And I set up a little writing group as part of the community, we call it. And we talked about a sense of belonging, and we're going to do one on grief. And all the feedback is, I never get a chance to share this kind of information. It's not always deemed as appropriate, but like just giving us the chance to kind of investigate stuff that you might have suppressed and parked away, and here's a place for you to share, and no one's going to judge you.
Amazing. So if anyone's listening and they're interested in getting involved, what should they do?
We're on social media. It's Dad's Outdoors Liverpool on Instagram, Dad's Outdoors on Facebook. We're in the process of getting our website up and running. It's coming soon, hopefully. And if you're in the South Liverpool area, look out for our flyers in your local shops. And there's a little QR code on the front of our flyer, and you just scan it, and you just join our WhatsApp community.
Oh, amazing.
And everyone just chats and shares in there, and
that's really fantastic. It's a really nice way to do it, isn't it, through the WhatsApp group as well? Because I think people will if they've got any preconceived anxiety, they'll see that this lovely community that already exists. That's very nice.
I think we found as well that the WhatsApp group has offered a method to communicate. Like we were talking before about not being stuck in your phone and things, but we found recently that the phones actually bring quite a lot of benefits to us. So we have the WhatsApp group, and some people might turn up and not say a word at the fire circle, but then the next day, once they've processed what was the discussion that happened, they'll be on the WhatsApp group, and they'll have their contribution, the day later and things like that.
One guy turned up recently and said, I haven't been, but I've been kind of lurking in the background. And he said, I've loved the communications that you've had. Like, you've made me feel like I belong already. And that's why he ended up coming to a fire circle. It was because of how we'd communicated with each other.
Amazing. That's really powerful, because it's one thing we touch on, but we have so many charities and organisations on here, and I understand the anxiety and getting over your front door for a lot of people, or that initial contact, it can be so daunting for people. But that sounds like a really lovely method, getting involved, say lurking in the background, the WhatsApp group, and just seeing how much of a lovely group is. That's going to encourage more people to come.
Well, yeah,
Good method.
I mean, it has worked the other way as well, didn't it? At one point, quite in a hilarious way. I made a massive double rainbow right outside my back door, and I put a comment on saying, "Look at this awesome rainbow," and then straight underneath it, X, whatever the person's name was, has left the group. And I was like, doesn't like rainbows.
He said he didn't like rainbows. What are you doing?
Yeah. But again, it just, he'll find his group somewhere, and what he's done is he's sat there, he's waited, and he's thought, oh, tree huggers and rainbow lovers, I'm not in, which is absolutely fine. We're not everyone's group, but he'll find his other group somewhere else.
Amazing. Keep up the good work. I just say I love following you on Instagram and seeing what's going on. It just always looks so good. I think if it's all right, we'll come along one evening as well.
Please do. Please do,
man.
Do you know what? Come down and record it.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
Yeah, good show.
We will do. That'd be a really good idea. We absolutely love it. So anyone that is listening, Dad's Outdoors Liverpool, get on to Instagram and social media and have a little look at. But do get involved if there is anyone. Say we know so many people that listen, whether they're healthcare professionals or wives, daughters. Anyone. Just encourage people. And I suppose it's one of those, isn't it? If you don't know it exists, you're not gonna go. So it's giving people options, isn't it? It's always a big thing.
Yeah, totally.
It is amazing, and keep up the good work. It's honestly, it's such a good idea. I absolutely love it.
Same to you.
Yeah.
Keep up your good work and what you're doing. It's
cheers.
wonderful.
Pete, Anthony, it's been lovely to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
Real
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, it's that part of the Man Hug when we, the hosts, have a chat about the theme and bring in some stats, data and brain health. So I've been having a look at fatherhood in the UK and some really interesting research articles. So some key stats. Around 85% of UK children have a relationship with their biological father at age 17. So even if parents no longer live together, showing fatherhood extends far beyond co-residence with fathers today, spending significantly more time with children than 30 years ago. So around 2 hours per day is the current sort of stats for that, but it was up from 15 to 30 minutes in the 1980s. So it's interesting to see, but progress has stalled since mid-2010. So despite this, it is reported that mothers still do the majority of routine and weekday childcare, particularly with under fives. In relation to fathers' mental health in the UK, around 1 in 10 UK fathers experience postnatal depression, which is roughly the same rate seen in mothers. 38% of first-time fathers report concerns about their mental health in the transition to fatherhood, which is a huge number, isn't it? For gaps in support, fathers routinely report being overlooked by perinatal services, antenatal classes and health professionals, despite evidence that paternal mental health affects the whole family. UK perinatal mental health services are largely mother-focused, with limited systematic screening or support for fathers. And in relation to men who can't become fathers, what we call involuntary childlessness, it's reported that 1 in 7 UK couples experience infertility, and male factors contribute up to about 50% of those cases. Infertility is strongly linked to depression, anxiety, shame, and relationship strain, with 71% of people struggling to conceive reporting feelings of failure. In terms of cost, the NHS postcode lotteries for IVF and delays due to age significantly limiting options for many men. And around 25% of UK men over 42 do not have children, compared with around 20% of women. Among men who wanted children but did not have them, nearly 40% report depression, and many describe long-term grief and social isolation. So in relation to men who choose not to become fathers, so voluntary childlessness, UK survey data shows a growing minority of younger adults are intending to remain child-free, particularly Gen Z, with around about 15% of 18 to 24 saying that they definitely do not want children, a further 11% saying probably do not. And among childless older millennials, aged around about 35 to 41 currently, around 1/3 say they will definitely not have children. Reasons cited within this research include cost of living and childcare, housing and work insecurity, climate and environmental concerns, changing values around identity, masculinity and life satisfaction. So in terms of social inequality and fatherhood, fathers are more involved when partners work full-time and when workplaces allow flexibility. Long working hours reduce paternal involvement. So higher income fathers are more likely to maintain high involvement, while low income fathers face greater barriers, and this is within the research identified as things such as shift work, insecure jobs and housing instability. So why fatherhood matters, and this is the evidence-based outcomes. Positive father involvement is linked to better child mental health, lower risk-taking behaviours in adolescence, stronger educational outcomes, often independently of mother's involvement. So yeah, some key takeaways from this. Fatherhood in the UK, it's diverse, it's changing and it's unequal. While many fathers are more involved than ever, mental health needs, infertility and voluntary childlessness remain under-recognised, particularly for men. Policy and services still lag behind the evidence, especially around men's mental health and reproductive experiences. Over to you, Ian.
I can remember when first found out that my partner was pregnant, and again, for me, it was, I guess, there was that absolute joy in terms that I was going to be a father, but also a real fear and being scared in terms of that sort of taking the responsibilities. So it's a mixed feeling for me. When it actually, so it was interesting, when the pregnancy, absolutely all fine. The birth was probably the most horrendous thing I've ever, and seen my partner in terms of, it was a difficult birth. So I was just glad of the healthcare services, because without them, we'd have been in real difficulty. So it wasn't a beautiful thing. It was really, really tough, and I don't usually share that when someone says, meet people and they're pregnant. I always say, oh, great, it goes well, and I really do hope it goes well, because when it doesn't, it's you're vulnerable. So it was a mixed thing. I guess for me, what happened actually then being a father, I remember it really clearly, because the Friday my wife then started with contractions. She was really calm. Went in on the Friday night. We were watching Roseanne on the Friday night on the TV. I can still remember it. She went to go for a bath. I've got everything ready. We went in, but the birth, as I said, was difficult, and it was born on the Saturday morning. It wasn't pleasant, but I can remember being really excited in terms of that, thinking of my own parents, telling them and everything from that. So that was really the exciting part. The reality was that the next day I was actually on shift. On the Monday I was actually back on shift and working. So there was no other sort of time off. And I look back at that, and so I was lucky it was the weekend. Do you know what I mean? So you'd look at that and you'd just think, God, that's absolute rubbish. And we'd always dreamed, we'd always wanted lots of children. It just never quite happened. And then this sort of came out of the blue. And the point I was trying to make is that we'd had plans. I always wanted to be a home father. I was going to give up my job and be at home. I was then, as a student nurse. So there wasn't that option. I look back and I wish I'd have done that and I'd taken that time off, but it never happened. So we struggled with that, and we managed and stuff, but it became really difficult. And I guess that would be my first thing. It's that support, and I know the fellas afterwards are going to talk about some of those issues, but it's that support for when you're a father. I guess what it made for me is that it made me reevaluate my own mum and dad. And I guess I'd grown, I was still saw my mum and dad. I spoke to them, still had that relationship, but we're definitely, I guess, some distance with my own dad. And it made me realise, gosh, my mum and dad were, they were young when they obviously had me. My dad was in the army, he was in national service, so I was born abroad, and they were abroad. I was thinking, how on earth did they manage? They were so much younger, and it just made me really evaluate that they did their best. Despite everything, we were loved as kids, me and my sister. And I just think, so that for me is the absolute essential thing. And it made me, in the end, I ended up writing to my dad. I wrote him a big letter, and I really re-established the links with him. And it's not, we weren't estranged or anything like that, but we definitely lost the closeness. And I think having that insight just made me reevaluate how important the role that my dad had played for me and that I wanted to play for my son, and I wanted my dad to be as the granddad for that. So it felt really, it was an opportune time to really, recognise that and to talk about it. And I remember the first time I actually hugged my dad, which I hadn't done for a long, long time. So we always hugged each other whenever we saw each other. And I'm just so glad. I lost my dad last year, so I'm just so glad that I've had all those. My dad was a granddad, and it was fabulous and everything else, but just so glad that I actually did that. But I just think it's dead important to be, in terms of whoever brings children up, and the parents, biological parents, I think are obviously important, and it's the most precious thing. I think in terms of your own child, and to have that part of that. And I know when I look at people and they've the distance, then become estranged, and it's so damning in terms of for the children who are often lost without a footing, and for the parents and stuff as well. So it's something that needs to be addressed, not just for your mental health, but just for kids' future. Well, it is your mental health, it's for everything in terms of that contact and that relationship for all concerned. It's absolutely important.
Yeah, I was just having a bit of a Google before about what fatherhood is, and a few things came up. So it's a state of responsibility. So I can engage with that. I've got blessed with a son and daughter who are both teenagers now. That's I use the term blessed broadly at times, but sometimes you just forget what it is to be a father, and you're just going along with life, and then all of a sudden something happens and you recognise that responsibility that you do have on your shoulders, and that you kick in, and then your fatherhood instincts take over, As a father, you say another word that was that came up before was nurturing. I think you just do that naturally, really, don't you? You want them to be as good a person as they can be, and you try and encourage them to be kind and thoughtful and but be themselves as well, be their own person. I think perhaps over the years I've been at risk of not allowing them that too much, and trying to mould them perhaps into something that they're not, and it's become apparent, obviously, over recent months. My son's just doing his GCSEs at the moment, and I'm seeing more and more of this young man who's just growing up so much all the time, and he's very, very different to me. He's just stepping into doing his exams, which are a big part of his life to date, and he's taking it just in his stride, and he's just so calm about, or seems to be so calm about things. And I keep asking him, is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And he's three exams in now, and he's bossing it. And it's important as a father to recognise that your children are going to develop their own personality and be different to you. And instead of clashing with that, embrace that, because at the end of the day, the more you're going to clash with that, then it's just going to lead to resentment from both parties and a distance between you. And my own relationship with my dad, I think there was a lot of that went on for many reasons, as I've spoken about previously on podcasts. But just picking up on what Ian said, after a period of not speaking to my dad for quite some time, we got back in touch, and I made a point of hugging him, just to show how much he meant to me. As he's my father. What's happened, and I think he got a lot from that. He'd never probably admit that, being obviously quite the personality he was, but I think that's important as well. When as we get older, it's showing that reciprocal love back to your father and whatnot. And I say my dad passed away about 8-9 years ago now, so but I'm lucky that I've got a wonderful stepfather as well. So he's kind of stepped in over the years and been an extremely positive role model as well. And that's another thing, role modelling when it comes to fatherhood. It's letting them know what your interests are, and they'll either pick that up or they won't pick that up, will they? And you know, helping them again to find their own way. I think we talked about it in the masculinity podcast last month about the difference between a dad and a father. So I was reading around that a little bit earlier as well, and just you know, dad's someone who's sort of perhaps active and committed in that sort of daily role. Doesn't need to necessarily be a biological father, but somebody that you know that child recognises as dad. And then a father perhaps is more recognised as the term for a biological act, if you like. People might disagree with that, or it was just something that I found earlier on. Then I found something about the 3 Ps of fatherhood. So being a provider. So I think again we've discussed that previously, haven't we? It's like the breadwinner and the, you know, putting the food on the table. The protector. You know, I'm not sure why the mother can't be the protector as well. You know, in a modern society, and the provider, yeah, exactly. And then the third one was a permanence. So being present. Whether you, again, as Dean mentioned, whether you're still together as a mother and father for that child, it's so important that both parents are involved in that child's upbringing. You know, the amount of patients that I see in practice who have mental health problems in their mid to late 20s because the parents have separated when they were younger and they only have partial access or no access to the father. It's very evident that that's a very common occurrence, or the relationship with the father has been affected due to the breakdown of the relationship with the mother. You know, going back to myself as a father, some overwhelming feelings at times during the last 16 years are that of guilt. I know when Joel was a little baby, I nearly left the nursing profession altogether because I felt that I was working shifts, I was working early, late nights, and I wasn't there enough to support my wife, and I wasn't there to spend enough time with him, and that guilt sort of really kicked in. I looked at leaving nursing, as I say, and it was luckily one of the managers at the times took me aside and said, "What can we do to help?" And I said, just one day every week that I know that I can spend time with him, and it's just, you know, Joel and Dad time, would make a big difference, and that's all it took. And I think sometimes as well, employers perhaps need to take on a little bit more ownership and responsibility as to how dads can manage that change of going from having no dependence to having this little human being that they're responsible for, they're a provider for, protector for, and want to be there for, but then they've still got to do that job which is going to be expectant on them not being around the child all times of day, and you're missing out on those key things in life, missing out on the first time they walk, missing out on the first words and things like that. That I felt a lot of guilt around that when my kids were growing up, and then the worry, you worry that you're not good enough, you worry that you're not a good father and things like that, and I've learned to have to deal a lot with that over the years, because when I was doing my master's degree, I was, again, my wife picked up the slack massively during those few years. So it's dealing with all these emotions as a father that if you're listening now, you might be feeling the same emotions, and it's, just speak to somebody about the way you're feeling. Don't bottle it all up and think that you're a rubbish father, or that the world would be better off without you, or those feelings of guilt, or you weren't as good as your dad, or and all these emotions that you manifest as you go through fatherhood. Just speak to somebody, speak to a friend, speak to, if needs be, speak to a counsellor. Don't suffer in silence. There's too many men with young children taking their own lives, and if they were just to realise that they're doing the best they can as a father, and they're doing a fantastic job regardless of the circumstances, as long as you show that child love and you're there for them, nothing else matters. So, I'll probably, on that note, finish.
Thanks so much for both your honest accounts of your own reflection. It's really valuable, and I found that quite emotive as well. So thank you so much. We're going to take a short break now, and then we're going to be joined by Kieran from Dad Matters.
We can all play a role in suicide prevention. Spotting the signs and starting a conversation with someone you're worried about can feel daunting.
But free online training from the Zero Suicide Alliance could help you gain the skills and confidence to have a potentially life-saving conversation.
It takes just 30 minutes, and you never know when you might need to use it. Be prepared. Take the training today. Visit zerosuicidealliance.com or search ZSA Suicide Awareness Training, because one life lost is one too many.
Okay, it's this part of the Man Hug where we shine a spotlight on a charity, organisation or project, and with this month's theme being fatherhood, we're really thrilled to be joined by Kieran from Dad Matters. So Kieran, welcome to the Man Hug.
Oh yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So for anyone who doesn't know anything about Dad Matters, we're going to come on to that in a minute, and you're going to give us all of the info and the detail about the charity. But first, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Kieran, I'm 40 odd, I've got kids coming out my ears, me and my partner have got 5 between us, plus wow. a grandson. Yeah. I've been a foster carer, I've been through child loss, I've been through traumatic deliveries, so I've got a lot of experience of being a dad. I like football, I'm a Bolton Wanderers fan for my sins. I also like being outdoors, like camping, like scouts, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm a bit of a those kind of things that I got from my dad. I think like football, camping, outdoors. Yeah, I feel a little bit like I'm quite privileged to get what he liked as well.
Oh, that's really cool. Our podcast that we did last month for our birthday was around masculinity, and the theme of father's role modelling came up an awful lot. Really, it was a really interesting discussion, and I think it's kind of led us into this episode of fatherhood. We're going to kind of touch on lots of different angles on this episode, for fathers as role models, for men who can't have children. We're going to focus on it in lots of different angles as well, really. So in terms of your role with Dad Matters, tell us a little bit about that then.
So I'm the Dad Matters lead at a charity called Home Start.
Right.
Home Start is a national federation of charities. So Home Start UK is the umbrella, and there's 160 something home starts across the UK, all supporting families with under 5s. Nice. We've got them in most areas around the country. Dad Matters is a specific project that's a perinatal and parent-infant mental health peer support service. That means that we support dads who've got children under 2 or that are expecting, with things like attachment and bonding, mental health, access to services. We support them with things like birth trauma, supporting a partner with mental health issues, supporting their own mental health issues. There's a whole lot that goes into it. We started in Tameside in 2017, and we expanded into Greater Manchester, and then we started to share it with some of the other local home starts. In the last year, we got some funding from the 1001 Critical Days Foundation, which was set up last year by Andrea Leadsom. And that's a grant-giving charity and a research charity. So they've given us money to establish Dad Matters as a central part of the national offer. So every home start can pick up Dad Matters now and deliver it in their local areas if they've got local funding. We're going through a process of delivering some funding to the network to be able to do that as well. And we're also able to evaluate it really well. We collect a lot of data, we have a lot of case studies, so we have a real evidence base of what works for those dads.
Amazing, yeah. So, any idea where like the premise for it came? Was it you said it was set up in Tameside? Was there a need for it in that area, or? Yeah,
so initially Home Start Host, who work in Greater Manchester, they were working with the Early Attachment Service, which in Tameside is a very specific NHS service for under 2s. And they were working with mums in a really great way, in a peer support way. With extra training, extra supervision, really enhanced the work. But they weren't seeing dads in the pathway, and they really wanted to see more dads in that parent-infant space, so specifically around those relationships with babies. And they got an innovation grant from the Health Foundation, which meant they could test some new things. When I applied for the job, I was a school teacher. I was really happy with my job, but I was really interested in that perinatal focus. So I applied for the job. And in the first year, they employed me on the basis that they wanted to try things that hadn't been tried yet. Everybody, when they set up a dad's service, thinks about a dad's group. What do dads like to do? What do men like to do? And how can we get them in? And that's a great way to bring men into a service. I used to work for Sure Start. I used to manage local programmes. And I knew that I could get dads into a dad's group by telling all the mums in the centre that it was on a Saturday morning, put breakfast on, they'll come. And when you've got 25, 30 dads in a room once a month, it feels very successful because you don't see dads anywhere else. But actually, when you've got 800 children under the age of 5 in that area, and you're only seeing 25 dads, and it's not enough. So we decided we needed to go somewhere else to see the dads. We didn't want to wait for them, because men don't reach out when you wait for them. We see that in mental health services as well. So we wanted to make sure we could reach in. We started off with 3 ideas of where we would do the work. The first one was with dads universally. We go to antenatal clinics, antenatal classes, neonatal units, mother and baby units, post-labour wards, birth registrations, family hubs, dads groups. We go to those places and we deliberately speak to the dads directly. In the past 9.5 years, we've seen over 40,000 dads in that space.
It's amazing.
And we've spoken to every one of them. It's all face-to-face conversations. That doesn't include any of our social media contact or messages through social media or emails. It doesn't include any one-to-one work that we might do or anything else. Every dad's asked how they are. So we're really curious about the answer, because you can't just take the first answer as gospel. We give them information that isn't about come to us if you're struggling. It's about here's how to get to know your baby, here's how to understand your mental health, here's how to speak to your partner about it, here's information about consoling a crying baby, helping with learning safer sleep practices. All of that kind of information is really important. And then the third thing we do, and this is crucial for what we want in terms of the relationship with the baby, is we bring the baby into the conversation. So if dads are at a 20-week scan, we'll talk to them about when babies can hear in the womb, how babies can differentiate voices, how babies share hormonal patterns with mum. So when mum's feeling stressed, baby will feel stressed, and that when mum's feeling calm, baby will feel calm, and that babies are building relationships before they're born with their dads because they can hear them. So all of those facts are really important. If we meet them somewhere where they're a bit further on, we might start to talk about skin to skin, how important that kind of activity is with your baby. We might talk about things like serve and return, which is like a conversation with the baby. That back and forth is really important for brain development and attachment. We might talk about things to do with the dad, so hormonal changes in men because babies are around, things like testosterone levels dropping, prolactin and vasopressin levels rise, and it helps us to be more attuned to our babies. We also might talk about some of the challenges that they might face because they're a dad. When babies cry, men's testosterone levels drop momentarily to help them to be more attuned in the moment. But if it's a prolonged cry and there's no obvious fix, then men can get more frustrated because testosterone levels rise, and they put us on like a safety or risk assessment footing, if you like. So that means it's like the saber-toothed tiger outside the cave. We're looking for a threat, but there isn't one, because we live in a very safe world. But babies, when they cry, it's a trigger for us to feel threatened. We need to step away, we need to keep the baby safe, we need to make sure that we're not frustrated when we're trying to console them. We can tag team with our partners, we can leave them safe even if they're crying, and calm ourselves down. So those information messages are really important for dads. They tell us that it's a part of why they engage with us. And that's in that universal space, and over 40,000 in the last 9 years is phenomenal. In the first 9 months of this year, we saw 10,000 in that space in a year, across 28 sites. The second part of the work that we do is around supporting professionals. We want to work with dads individually, but to get them in, we can't invite them. They don't come. So we need to work with professionals around families. That includes people like health visitors, midwives, perinatal mental health nurses, early help services, family hubs, dads groups, social prescribers, GPs. So the work we do there is around training them to help improve their practice with dads, so they understand about language and resource. They understand the referral pathways, so they can get dads into us when they need to. And we do a lot of consultation with them. We do a lot of presentations in team meetings, things like that. That's the second part, and that's really important because that really feeds into the third part where we take referrals. We have one-to-one support for dads where it's led by the dad, it's open as long as they need it to be open usually, and we support them with primarily the relationship with the baby, but to do that we need to help support their mental health. So that might be helping them acknowledge what their mental health issues are and finding the right clinical support for that, or peer support for that. We work with other agencies within there, so we signpost into lots of places like Andy's Man Club, Directions for Men is another one in the northwest, Mentel, and there's plenty across the country in different localities that we would link in with to make sure that dads get all the information that will help them. We don't want to keep the dads to ourselves. We want to make sure that they find the right place to be.
I'm absolutely blown away. I think it's incredible what you do. That whole the 3-part model is fantastic. I think one thing that really jumped out at me is kind of like that men kind of don't have the education of preparing to be a dad. And I think you hit the nail on the head about some of the things that men need to know before a baby's born, and then once you've become a dad for the first time. How important is that for you guys? The educational side of it.
Oh, it's massive because what we found was that men who are told that they're pregnant or they're expecting, when they realise that, they go into supporting partner mode. They don't go into preparing to be a dad mode. Every dad that we ever saw at an antenatal class in the pilot that we did would tell us that they were there to support mum. They were there to be educated on how to support mum. And every question they asked, every activity they did was about, how do I support mum with things like pain relief, through labour, through signs of labour? What if things go wrong? What if, what do I do to support mum with that? So when they were hearing messages about parenting and about relationships with babies, they were thinking, how do I support mum with that? How do I give mum the time to do that? How do I give mum the breaks that they need to be rested? So what we wanted to do was have an opportunity to speak to the dads about their role and their specific role, and how slightly different it is to what mums do. Mums nurture babies in an inward way. They keep them safe, they protect them, they bring them into themselves. Whereas men nurture in just as loving a way, but they face the baby at the world, and they do that over time. Men are more likely to be involved in supporting resilient mental health, supporting those social cues and social behaviours, and men are more likely to play, and babies and men have the spikes in their oxytocin levels when they play together, whereas mums and babies have spikes in oxytocin when they nurture each other. So when we know that, we can tell dads that play is a massive part of your love language with your baby. But also, when you have a newborn, it doesn't feel natural to play with a newborn gently, because men are much more likely to be roughhousing. But actually what we can talk about is how we build to that, from things like blowing raspberries, making silly faces, doing silly voices. All that education helps dads to be more involved in their baby's development. It also gives them more motivation to do more, and that's key for babies.
Wow. A lot of this is going to be kind of new information for people who are listening. Do you think I suppose it's kind of that big question is, should we be doing more in education in school level for letting boys and men know about this really integral part?
Absolutely. One of my ambitions, whether it's through Dad Matters or not, is to work with 13-14-year-olds, not just boys, because girls need to know the role of dads, because girls will be choosing dads in the future. So they need to know that dads have a role. They need to know that it's important for the baby. They need to know that it doesn't matter if they're separated to be able to do those roles as well. So we need to work with both. And educating around parenting is something that we don't do a lot of in schools. There's a lot of education around how teenagers relate to their parents, but there's not a lot about how are you going to be when you're a parent. But we do talk to them about things like addiction and relationships and sex. We don't talk about parenting relationships, and that's a key part of it, I think.
That's really fascinating, isn't it? In terms of people that you've worked with, I've seen incredible testimonials all over the website. This model clearly works, doesn't it? For yourself, what's some of the sort of the key moments that stick out with you when you've met with dads?
There's so many. I've worked with hundreds of dads. Over the 9 years of since the pilot, we've worked with 2,000 dads one-to-one. In the last 9 months, we've worked with nearly 900 dads just in 9 months. Some of the ones that stick out for me, there was one dad who came to us saying that he was struggling with the relationship with his baby. It wasn't the same as the relationship he had with his toddler, and he wanted it to be better. And he was telling me this at a play centre where we had an event. And while he was telling me, the baby startled, as babies do, and he turned to the baby mid-conversation, put a hand on the baby's tummy, stroked the baby a little bit, whispered some calming words, made sure she was okay, and came back to the conversation, and carried on telling me how his relationship wasn't working. Excuse me. So then I pointed out to him exactly what I'd seen, and as soon as I did that, he was like, "Oh, I hadn't noticed that." And then for the rest of the day that we were there, I could see him looking at the baby, waiting for the cues, rather than being kind of reactive. He became more proactive in that. We have other dads that have come to us and said the fact they learned from us all of the stuff about how babies relate has really helped to keep them safe within their mental health issues. We've got dads that have said that they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact they got a referral, which is massive for dads, but it's massive for babies as well. The fund that fund us, 1001 Critical Days, also funded some research into suicide in dads, and we found that 2 to 3 babies every week in the UK lose their dad to suicide.
Really?
And that's 7 times more than mums in the same period. Wow. But we have in this country, we have fixed amounts of money for maternal mental health, and we don't have anything for paternal mental health at the moment, which one of the reasons the foundation funded us, because we're one of the only organisations that's doing this work.
Wow, that's huge, isn't it? And I suppose you probably get a lot of new dads in particular who probably self-critical of themselves, and obviously that's going to play into their mental health as well, isn't it? Really,
I think one of the things that we really want to be able to do is help dads to understand they shouldn't compare themselves to mum. A lot of dads assume that mums are the natural parent because they naturally go through childbirth, but actually mums are learning as well. They just usually have more time. They have more time off. They have more professionals around them. They have more touch points with services. Men need to learn, so they need to be involved in all of those touch points that mums are in, so they can learn too. And actually letting mum do that work, because mum's better at it, means that you will never get good at it. And so you need to try, you need to be consistent, you need to work on that. But we also need mums to understand that yes, it's difficult to watch your partner struggle to console the baby when they're crying, and sometimes it might be easier to take the baby off them and console them, but men need to be consistent, and they need to learn how to do it properly. And it might not look like you might both do it differently, and the babies don't mind that.
That's again fascinating. Again, you've already hit on loads of points why this works, but what if you sum it up to someone, why does Dad Matters work? What's the key things that you think?
One particular phrase is we can't wait for dads to reach out, we have to reach in. We go to them, we're direct, we ask the right questions at the right time about things that might be bothering them, and when you do that, men will talk to you. They need the platform to talk on, and they won't try and find that platform themselves usually. So we need to make sure we're providing the right platform.
That's it, isn't it? And I think we've been running this podcast for 3 years now. We've met with so many men's charities, and you often hear, oh, men don't talk, and it's like it's total nonsense. Men do talk, they just need to be in that right place, don't they? In that right space, in that right environment, and they'll happily talk.
And consistency makes it easier. Too many charities or organisations start up with a view that because what they do is good, they'll get all the men in. But actually, you might get one, or you might not get any for a while. You might get 1 or 2 for a bit. It might build up with word of mouth. But you also need to go to those men and say, this is for you, this is what you're going to need to use. That's why platforms like Andy's Man Club now are doing so well, because it's consistent, it's at the same time, it's in the same place, it's the same people, it's service user led. And it works because the messaging is not just aimed at the men that need it, it's aimed at the men that don't need it but might do. And it's aimed at the partners and the families and the professionals and the colleagues of the men that might need it.
That's it, So for anyone who's listening and they want to learn more about Dad Matters, and they want to, maybe have a look at how to refer or how to signpost someone they're concerned about or things like this, what's the advice that you give for them?
So we have 28 Dad Matters services within Home Starts in the UK, but there's 160 something Home Starts across the UK. So the best place to find that information is on the website. dadmatters.org.uk is for the Dad Matters services. You can find contact details for your local one, but you can also find blog posts, signposting, information for dads. There's loads on there that will be useful. And you can follow us on social media at Dad Matters UK. If you want to find out about Home Start, that offer more than just Dad Matters, lots of family support stuff, speech and language and school readiness and things like that, you can find that at homestart.org.uk, and Home Start has a hyphen.
Amazing. There you go. So loads of information, and for people who may be working in this area, or even if you've got a relative who's becoming a dad for the first time, all of this, go and check it out. Have a look at the website. I've had a look myself, and I'm just blown away with the resources and the testimonials are incredible. You can see the impact that this has on men in particular. It's huge. And
I think the other thing is that while while it says Dad on the tin, we're a baby service. We're all about improving babies' outcomes, and we do that because dads don't get the opportunity to learn about it. So we target dads, but really, the babies, the men of tomorrow, the women of tomorrow, they're the ones that we're impacting now by supporting their dads.
It's such an important point, isn't it? And I think we've had probably over the last few years, haven't we, a couple of kind of like high profile and celebs have come out talking about the importance of becoming a dad for the first time as well. And I think it only just puts it more on the map, doesn't it, really? At a kind of government level, what's your big sort of like, your magic wand? What would you...
There's two things that I would really like to see, and I bang on about this at every opportunity. And at Dad Matters we have so much evidence. We support the all parliamentary groups for fatherhood. We do work with campaigners. We do support that evidence building for government and policymakers. So the first thing is we need better records for services. So something like if the Red Book became digital, we could do it so that it's built around a baby, so dads are included in that. Because at the moment it's really difficult to have dad's details. That means services don't know who dad is or where he is unless mum gives them the information or dad's at an appointment. But we need to make sure that's better because that means that it'll lead into other services later. And specific perinatal services rather than generic men's services. And then the second thing is about, and this is probably a much bigger societal issue, the pathways that men find themselves in reinforce the message that men are secondary parents. Things like if you separate and you can't get benefits that relate to being a parent, but you might have your children 50% of the time, but you can't get housing benefit, child tax credits. That means that a lot of men won't be able to get a house that will accommodate their children to stay overnight, and it becomes a catch-22. And other systems like the way family court works. When you're in the family court system, actually, it's really equal and it's all about the children's rights, but education around that is lacking. Men don't understand that. They see it as mums get residency, so mums are more important, but actually that's usually because it's the status quo for the children and it's probably the best thing for them in the moment. So we need to have more education around those two things.
It's amazing that you guys are involved in that, the all-party parliamentary group advice, because it's got to come from people with this lived experience, hasn't it, if we're ever gonna see any change. Amazing. I can't thank you enough. The work you guys do is so needed. It's incredible. Final kind of plugs again then. So for anyone who wants to find out a bit more.
So yeah, definitely Homestart UK or Dad Matters UK. It's dad without an S. If you think about how a baby would say it, my dad matters. That's how we would phrase it. You can search that and you'll find us. Yeah, amazing. Kieran, thank you so much. Honestly, been a great guest, and hopefully people listening, if this is new to you, you can go out and you can find out a bit more, and hopefully it'll help enhance your signposting knowledge as well. So, amazing.
Kieran,
thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to The Man Hug. Please make sure that you come and follow us on Instagram. It's @TheManHug. You can also do a search for us on TikTok and YouTube.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.